Well, how's all the futurity pressure going for you? Good, glad to get through the first round with a couple of big scores.
Good. You know, it's funny. Like, we still get nervous, but it doesn't seem to get to me quite as bad as it used to. But you know, yeah, it's always good to get through that first round.
Yeah, give you a little bit of time to kind of recoup, and I think your training changes from that first round too. Knowing you've got a show horse now, you're not at a pre-work, and you got something that you can go count on a little bit, obviously, especially with some good scores.
Yeah, you know, I was talking, Johnny Mitchell and I were talking about this the other day, and I mentioned, you know, it's funny how these horses change after we show them the first time. And he said, I don't know if it's as much the horses as it is us. And I think he's right. You know, I think we gain confidence in what we have because, you know, in all the years I've come to the futurity now and some of the great horses I've brought to the futurity, you know, still to this day, I've never had one that there wasn't something about them that in the back of my mind worried me a little bit, you know, and I think that's just the nature of it. It's just.
Well, it is, and it's like, I mean, it really is like studying for a big test, and now you got the results back after that first round. You know, okay, I can do this, you know, and like you said, I think sometimes it is more about yourself than it is the horse. And,
that confidence, I think, is a big key. Yeah.
Well, Matt, we've been wanting to sit down and do this for a while now, and especially once you hit that $10 million mark, I mean, that's just an amazing feat to cross $10 million in lifetime earnings. And the way you've done it, I thought, you know, that there's such a story behind all that, and the transitions throughout your career, how you've modified things, how you've changed, you know, directions a little bit in some ways. But 43 years of showing that you won your first check in 1981, $320. And that was aboard Tari J. And since then, 43 years of showing, like I said, $10 million. You had 5 years where you won over $600,000 a year. I mean, that's just an incredible feat, and we're going to go into that a little bit here in a minute. But just in the last 26 years, 24 of those years, you've won over $200,000. 5 of those years over $600,000, and 4 years between $500,000 and $600,000, and 13 years between $300,000 and $500,000. What is that? Has that sunk in? Like, thinking about that now, because I know you don't sit there and think about that stuff, but just talking about it now and thinking about that, what does that kind of mean to you?
Well, I think I mean, as far as what it means to me is, like, I've always, like, my goal has always been to consistently have good horses, and for them to be consistent and stay good throughout their show career. And, you know, so when I look back at that, you know, it's reassurance to me that I feel like I've done that. And that's kind of been my goal since I started was, you know, you're young and we all, you know, you're young and you're starting and, you know, we all want to be the best and all that. But what I really wanted to do is just be consistent. And I feel like I've done that, and hopefully I can keep doing that for several more years.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what these numbers show is the consistency in your program, which is, you know, we all talk about cutting as a roller coaster, which it is, but it's short roller coaster rides. Yeah. But over the year, you know, as long as you can keep finding a way to get to those highs, there's going to be some lows in between, but that's where the consistency comes in, and I think that really solidifies, you know, your program, what you've done, and that's kind of why we wanted to talk about this. But let's go back to the very beginning. You were born in 1969.
Yes, sir.
Your dad, Dick Gaines, big-time trainer at the time, born into the cutting horse family.
Well, actually, so he didn't start training till, I believe, 80. Actually training for the public. He was, when I was a kid, he was vice president of a bank there in Byers and trained his own horses and raised Doc Tari and, you know, started breeding him. And I think it was 1980 that he actually started training horses for the public and full time and all that. So I mean, yeah, from the time I was, 11 years old, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, but so, I mean, that's, you know, my whole life was pretty much, you know, when you work for farmer, rancher, horse trainer, you're free labor. So that's
a big list of chores.
That's your life.
Literally starting from the bottom. Yeah. What? So were you riding a lot? I mean, were you spending a lot of time down the barn riding, or what were you doing? You know, as a kid?
Yes. Once I got, I guess probably by the time I was 12 or 13, I did a lot of riding, loping horses. When I got old enough, I'm not sure, maybe I was 13 or old, started helping with breaking the 2-year-olds and all that stuff. And we did a lot of ranching too. He ran quite a bit of cattle, and so we would take care of those, and just so it was a lot of riding, riding young horses, getting horses ready to work and show, and all that stuff, and a lot of just ranching stuff too. So I mean, it was kind of a whatever needed to be done, from the start.
Yeah. Were you playing any sports, baseball, football?
So I did. So I played baseball as a young kid. When I got into junior high, it was primarily I played football and basketball, and then I loved football. I was probably better at basketball, even though I'm short, but I could shoot really good.
Yeah.
And then I played. I guess I quit playing basketball maybe in 8th grade because the futurity just was right in the middle of basketball season, right? So I was gone for at least 2 weeks during basketball season. So I quit playing basketball, kept playing football, and then I had a bad car wreck. I guess the summer before my sophomore year, and I didn't get to play my sophomore or junior year. I tried to come back and play my senior year, and I made it through 2 scrimmages and 2 games, I think, and I got hit in the leg, and it was back to 3 months of therapy, and so that kind of ended my sports career. Not that I had a real good one anyway.
Right, yeah. So you were 12 years old back in 1981 when you won your first check on Tari J, that $320 check. Do you remember anything about that ride? What that was like?
Really. No.
It was a long time ago.
I was probably so nervous. I probably didn't remember anything about it as soon as it got over.
Were you showing a lot in the youth?
I never did show much in the youth. I showed a little bit in the youth, but it was once I kind of got, I guess when I very first started showing, I showed some in the youth, but we never went to enough weekend cuttings to where, like, I wasn't ever going to win the world or anything like that. So, and I was fortunate, kind of, after my first year, maybe 2 years of getting to show some, I got to get on a few pretty good horses that I could win on I could get checks on in the non-pro and stuff. So, and I paid my dad, I paid my own entry fees, and so, I mean, I would just, when I could go show the weekend, I'd go show on the non-pro usually because it was fresh cows and I could, get showed, get home kind of deal. And so, I mean, I probably as a kid showed more in the non-pro than I did in the youth, but which looking back was good.
Yeah. Was that aged events or mostly weekend?
Mostly weekend then. I did show, so a lot of people won't know this, some will remember it, but back when I was, say, 13 years old, a non-pro could show a horse in the open. Yeah, a non-pro could show somebody else's horse in the open.
Oh, okay.
But not in the non-pro.
Yeah.
So I rode a few horses for my dad back then, like at the futurity and stuff.
Yeah.
Never did all that good, make second go round, but so I did do some of that. And then, probably when I got 14, 15, I started showing in some aged events and stuff. I think also back then I could show in the amateur. I don't remember how all the rules were then. They changed so much, but I started showing more in the aged events kind of as I got older.
So in 1990, you win the non-pro futurity on Playboy's Linnea. Talk a little bit about it. How did that come about? How did you get that horse? I mean, did you?
Well, so my dad raised it.
Yeah.
She was a Playboy of a mare, really good mare he had named Tari Linnea.
Yeah.
And she was kind of my project. Like, I started out training her, rode her as a 2-year-old, trained her as an early 3-year-old. But when I was in school, my dad would work her, so we kind of both trained her. And so a month before the futurity started, like I had been trained. I had her running off both ways, and my dad
Thought
got
you knew
back
what you were
on her.
doing.
And here's what's really dumb about it. I borrowed the money from the bank to enter the futurity.
Oh no.
Like, I didn't have enough money to enter the futurity. I borrowed the money.
Right.
That's how dumb I was. And so anyway, he started working her for me, and he kind of got her put together and showed her the first round, and she was pretty good, and second round pretty good, made the semifinals, and got her through the semifinals, made the finals. I remember telling my dad we were working, I think it was the morning before the finals, I said, I think maybe I need to work her. He's like,
Nope.
he's like, how dumb are you? Like, do you not remember how she was when you were working her? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You were working. So, yeah, and I don't know, that night it was funny. So I had been showing her mother, Tari Lanier. I was in college, and I was showing her on the weekends. And I just sold her to Lex Graham. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was funny. Shorty and I were pretty close. I'd spent some time with Shorty, and I remember that year they had done a video about Shorty and Bill and stuff, and that video was playing. And I don't know, it was funny. Something kind of came over me, and I just had a feeling, I'm gonna win this deal tonight. And I don't know where it came from, but I mean, I knew it inside. And I remember I told Lex was sitting right by Spencer Hardin, who made the finals too, and I rode over to Lex. I said, I'm fixing to make you proud of that mare you bought. And I mean, I just knew it. I don't know. It was weird, and and it turned out that way.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah. What? How did things change for you after that? Obviously, you're still in college, and now you've won the non-pro futurity. You starting to think about a career in training horses or showing?
I wanted to. That's what I wanted to do all along. I had a lot of pressure from my parents, like a lot of kids. Especially back then. Go to college, get a degree. You don't want to be a horse trainer. Like, get a degree and do this as a hobby. And so I tried that. Dennis Moreland and actually had talked to me about. It was right then that trade agreement had gone through, NAFTA, I guess it was, with Mexico and all, and he was moving his business down to Mexico to make everything, and he didn't have any kids really to take it over. So, the idea was when I graduated college, I was going to go down there and help him and learn the business and eventually take it over. And so I tried that, and Dennis was great, and it was a good experience, but I wasn't happy. I wanted to be riding horses. So, and I was running the booth, his booth, I think it was in Abilene, and was talking to some people and, kind of telling them, I'm not really happy doing this. I want to ride horses. And it wasn't long after I got home from Abilene, a guy, Chapel Sides from Mississippi called me, which I didn't know him, and said he heard I wanted to train horses. Would I be interested in coming out there? And so picked up, moved out there and started training horses.
That's quite the step. So I mean, now you've made the commitment. You're going to go be a horse trainer right now. I mean, and going back during those years, I mean, you had Zach T. Wood early on. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, to back up a little bit even further, his mother was a phenomenal horse. She was crazy, goofy, but a really good mare. And I got to show her some, did well on her, and then we got Zach T. Wood out of her, and he obviously was a really nice horse. I don't think I showed him. I don't think I showed him maybe till he was 5, and then I started showing him, in the non-pro and stuff. But he was just such a cool horse. So, I don't know, just as goofy as his mom. Well, he had her talent, but a lot more solid mind. He was kind of like a Gildan as a stud, and just so smart and just a really nice horse. So I mean, when you showed him, you're supposed to do good. Yeah. So you turned your non-pro card in 1993, and you head east. Yeah.
What changed then? What you start taking horses in there?
So the deal when I moved out there, and this, if people saw this place where I started, they wouldn't believe it. I mean, all it was a rundown cattle ranch basically, and it had an old arena, but the stall, it was all old wooden stalls, and I don't think they'd been cleaned in 5 years. I mean, I'm talking about shit that deep, and so I mean, it was experience. I spent the first whole week there just stripping stalls, and I remember telling that guy, "Hey, we need to get some shavings." He said, "Shavings? What do we need shavings for?" I'm like, "Well, if you expect people to send horses here, like, you know, we got to clean this place up as much as we can."
Yeah.
So so my deal was he gave me a place to live. And he guaranteed me, and I rode his horses. He guaranteed me $2,000 a month, and I rode his horses and outside horses. So, if I had enough outside horses to make $2,000 or more a month, then he didn't pay me anything. If I didn't, he'd make up the difference. And that was kind of the deal as it started. And so, you know, I started out there, and honestly, when I started, I'd never trained a horse from start to finish. I'd worked older horses, 2-year-olds, you know, 3-year-olds at different points in time, but never actually took one and trained it. So, you know, the first step was, to me, was to prove to myself that I could train one to cut. And, you know, and so that was my focus that first year. And I had a couple 3-year-olds I took to some little futurities out east back there, and I might have won one or in reserve at another one, and but they were, you know, they were trained. And then that next group of colts, I just looked at the first ones I trained, was all right, so I know I can train one to cut now, so, but what can I do to make it better?
Yeah.
And I just kind of did that year after year, you know, there at the start. And I guess I was there at his place for, I guess, about a year and a half, and then I went to work for Charles Spence.
Yeah.
And you know, and then when I went to work for him, then I got started getting to get on some good horses. I do need to back up a little bit because so when I first got to Mississippi, like, the horses I had, even older horses, like, they were terrible. Like, there wasn't anything very good that you could do good on. And there was a guy out there, farmer, named Terry Toole, and he was a great guy. And I tell you what, like, if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd be, honestly, because he was the first one. He came to me and he said, "Matt," he said, we got to get you a horse that's good enough you can win on."
Mm-hmm.
And so we started looking, and I don't remember exactly how it came about, but Sam Shepard had a gelding named Manalina Ray J. And we went down there and tried it and bought it. And we got him and started going to those shows around there. And I mean, we started beating everybody in the open and the non-pro.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it was not long ago, we were driving somewhere, and Tara asked me, she said, "What, of all the horses you rode, what horse would you say is the most instrumental in your career?" And I said, "That's easy, Manalina Ray J."
Really?
And she's like, "Who in the hell is Manalina Ray J?" She didn't even know that horse, you know. And so it was kind of funny. But yeah, if it wouldn't have been for Terry and that horse, I don't know. Like, I might still be out there trying to survive.
Well, and it's now you've gone from working with your dad and Shorty Freeman around. You've got all these great mentors around you. Now you've taken that step and you've gone out on your own out east, and you've basically insulated yourself from all that help. And now it's like it's you, yourself, and I. And and what was some, like you said, I mean, just learning how to train a horse from start to finish, and then going and showing it and doing that. What were some of the struggles you faced, you know, leading up to that?
Well, I mean, all of it.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, I mean, to begin with, could I figure out how to make one cut? I didn't know. I'd never done it before.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not talking about good enough to win on. I'm just talking about, you know, can I actually train one where I can put my hand down and they'll do what they're supposed to do? So, you know, so I mean, it was a lot of trial and error and, you know, and conversations with my dad over the phone and stuff. But I think that, you know, looking back, that time was really good for me because I had a lot of lot of instruction growing up and around people who knew and listened and paid attention. But, at some point you got to figure it out on your own. You got to figure out how to put those,
fix it.
Yeah, and you got to figure out how to put those pieces together for yourself. And, so it was good for me. And it was just, it was a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. So then you go to work for Charles Spence, and like you said, you've bought Manolina Ray J, and now we've got, the next couple of years, we've got Freckles Fancy Twist, we've got I Knew She Would, and all of a sudden you jump up, you're a double open futurity finalist that year in 1995. You won $71,000 that year. That was a pretty quick learning curve right there from going out on your own 2 years before or 3 years before, and now you're a double open futurity finalist. You figured your program out pretty quick by the sounds of it.
Well, I think it was two things. One first was Terry Toole believing in me and giving me that horse, and then when I went to work for Charles, he got me on good horses, and he had a lot more belief in me than he should have, and which, it's like, and when you're a young like guy like that, you need, It's funny to me. I see some of these customers, with horses with these young kids, and and sometimes they're always on them, and it's like, man, like, if you want that guy to succeed, like, support him, like, put him in a position where you can help him and get him around people who can help him, but like, you got to have his back a little bit. Like, he's like, if it's like, if you believe in him, you gotta show you believe in him, and because I do, I think, if it wouldn't be for that support, it's hard to be confident anyway when you're in that spot. And
it's quick to get your feel. You can easily get your feelings hurt in this business. It doesn't take much.
But so I think that was a lot of it. I remember, so when I first went to work for Charles, he hired me during the futurity. What did we figure out? That was 95 or 94.
You started riding for Charles, and then you made a double open finalist in 95.
So he hired me during the 94 futurity.
Yeah.
And I had brought a horse out here that a stud that Chapel Sides owned, and I showed him March 13. I think both go around. He wasn't that good a horse, and I had a meeting with Charles. So and we made a deal, and so I went home, took those horses home, told Chapel that I was going to work for Charles, and then Charles flew me back out here for the futurity sales, and I never will forget. So we're sitting there during the 2-year-old sale at futurity, because we don't, we need horses, and we had decided we were going to buy 4 2-year-olds, and so we sat there, and Charles, he sits there with me for about 30 minutes, and we hadn't bought anything yet. He said, well, bud, he said, I'm going to go get something to eat. If you see something you like, buy it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I said, I'm not going to sit here and spend your money without you here. And he said, what the hell did I hire you for?
Right, yeah.
He said, you see something, you buy it. He said, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And so I did, and and I think actually, so one of those I bought, Checks Rio Hickory.
Yeah.
I made the finals on her. The Moonlight and Bay mare, the other one I made the futurity finals on, Charles actually already had, and Pat Earnhardt had started her. Mm-hmm. And then I don't remember what, we bought a Playboy mare, I think it was, that Charles maybe made the amateur finals on, and I don't really remember what the other one was, but I think at least 3 of the 4 made some finals while we were here that next year anyway. So
yeah. So shortly after that, a year or two after that, in 1996, you moved down here to Weatherford. Charles set you up down here. What was the reasoning behind that? Just want to be closer to the big shows, or?
I think that was part of it. I think a lot of it was, by this time I had gotten, Paul was a big mentor to me. Like, I loved his horses. I loved the way they worked, and I tried to learn as much as I could from him. And I tell people all the time, there was no accident. The place Charles bought was right across the street from Bar H. Like, just like I was talking earlier, like, he he put me in a spot there where I had easy access to Paul and Winston, and, you know, where I could learn and get help and get better. And you know, and I mean, he did that on purpose. And, you know, and that's when, to me, when we made that move and I got to start working around those guys, and I worked with them a lot. I worked a lot of their fresh cows, and I spent a lot of time, maybe more time at Bar H than I did at our place. But that's when I think things really started to change for me, and my program really started to come together. Because as a kid, you know, my dad was really good at making a horse think. But, you know, back in those days, nobody got them that broke. And that's kind of what I got from Paul and Winston, was learning how to, you know, get a horse more broke and to where they could be more efficient with their body. And, you know, I kind of took that with the background I'd had as a kid, making a horse think, and kind of blended the two. And that's kind of what the basis of, you know, what my program became. So that move and getting to spend time with those, to me, is what really made the difference.
And obviously you and Paul have been close for many years. You've done training videos together. What is a piece of advice that Paul gave you that really kind of, you know, that maybe you still look back on now? Or, I mean, obviously there was a lot of advice, but is there something that stands out?
You know, yes. Maybe more than anything was, you know, of course, this has changed a little bit too, but it still holds true. Just maybe the numbers different. But, you know, he always said, look, as far as age limits, he's like, look, it's not that hard to mark a 72 if you don't have any mistakes. He's like, every time you have a miss or you have a mistake in there, you know, to mark that 2, you had to have been marking a 3, or, you know, and so on. So, you know, so that really resonated with me, was, you know, if I can get them trained to be good, consistent horses that don't make mistakes, and, you know, then I've given myself the best chance to win. Because, and I've really gotten to where I believe now, especially as horse trainers, I really feel like all we can do is teach them how to do their job as efficiently as we can, and them be as confident in their job as they can, and the rest of it's kind of up to them. How, you know, how good are they? And, you know, I mean, I really think that's our job, is teach them how to do their job the best they can, and do it as confident as they can, and the rest is up to their ability.
Yeah, and then not get in their way when it counts.
Yeah.
That's sometimes the hardest part.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So then the next couple of years, I mean, in 1998, you broke the $200,000 mark in earnings for that year. You're riding horses such as Playboy McRae, Clay's Little Kit, Jack Ruby, Billy Shortlina, and I believe Clint Allen's come to work for you now.
Yeah.
What were those years like for you? Like, now that you've established yourself down there a little bit, you know, like you said, you've been working with Paul, and now Charles has given you all the tools you need, and now you've got Clint working there with you. How did that really kind of elevate your program?
Well, I think so. It was about that time. I remember going to Paul, and I told him, I said, look, Paul, I said, I've gotten to where, like, I go to all these shows, and I said, like, I almost always make finals. Sometimes I'll make finals on every horse I take. But when I get in the finals, like, a 19's as much as I can mark. You know, what I need to do to, you know, to get to that next level. And I remember him telling me, he said, look, he said, your horses are trained. He said, but he said, it's a little too much, you know, run, stop, wait. You know, there's not enough animation, basically. You know, he said, you need to let those horses cow a little bit more. You know, so that was, you know, I got to thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, so how do I take, you know, the foundation, basically, you know, let them give up a little bit of control, you know, and let those horses cow a little bit more. So started, you know, focusing on that, blending that in with, you know, what I'd been doing, and that made a huge difference. Like, that's when things really started take off from me. And obviously, all those horses you just named, they were great horses.
Yeah.
You know, but that tip there, which came at the right time too. You know, I mean, I think everything happens in God's time, and that was part of it. It was, you know, it was. If I'd have gotten that information earlier, it might have, but I had a good foundation under me, and it was like, okay, so you got that, now let's add this to that, and that's what I did, and that's when things really started taking off for me, I think.
Yeah. How did Clint come to work for you?
So, you know what, I really don't remember exactly how.
Just kind of happened.
But I mean, the best I remember, he called me, he was in New Zealand, and he had heard from somebody we were looking to hire somebody, and so we hired him. He flew over, and if I remember right, I don't even know if he really knew what a cutting horse was when he got there.
Yeah.
And but he figured it out pretty quick. And you know, and like honestly, those, you know, which I mean, it took him a couple years to, but once he figured it out, you know, those years while he was there, it made my job so much easier. I wouldn't have had near the success I had without him, you know, because, you know, there was some years in there, 2004, I think it was, I had my hip surgery, and, you know, and even, you know, just being gone to all the shows and having him there at home working those colts. And if I had one that was really tough, I could give it to him for 2 or 3 weeks and get it back, and it's going to be better. And, you know, so, I mean, honestly, like, he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of what I won while he was there, because he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, a lot of these trainers that have been very successful, and you can look at years where they are like really successful, and you can look at who was working for them at the time, and I think there's a balance there, like you mentioned. Like, those guys are keeping that consistency going. They're working those horses the same, and then you go show them, or you go put that show work on them and elevate them. Sometimes, you know, you go over that edge, and you got to be able to bring them back, and that's where that, you know, that good cop, bad cop sort of thing.
Well, and Clint was, you know, and this will be something good for a lot of these young guys to hear. Like, you know, he came to work for me. He was there, I think, for 8 years, at least 8 years. And he, you know, like I said, he didn't really know what a cutting horse was, but he worked his ass off. And I mean, he, you know, and he was going to figure it out. I mean, he had his mind made up. He was going to figure it out, and did whatever it took to get there. Like, you know, I mean, it didn't matter if it took 24 hours a day. He was going to spend that working at it to figure it out. And, you know, and I mean, I felt like there was times like I was always having to hold him back a little bit. I wasn't ever having to, you know, try to get him to do more. It was always, okay, like, you know, you got to back off a little bit here, you know. But I mean, he had that mindset. He was going to figure it out, and there wasn't anything going to keep him from doing it.
Well, let's, you know, another important chapter in your life. 1999, Charles suddenly passes away. What was going through your mind during that period? How did that impact your program?
Oh man, that was one of the hardest. I mean, hard for me to talk about without getting a little choked up, because Charles and I had gotten so close. I mean, and don't get me wrong, we butted heads a lot, but it, you know, he's one of those guys. He would push you till, you know, on different things until you bowed up, and, you know, and that's just, and it was, and he did it intentionally, you know, but you know, just trying to, you know, make you better and stuff. But I mean, he really became more like another father to me. I mean, we spent a lot of time together. He hated to be alone, so we were together a lot. And you know, and like I said, he, you know, he always, you know, stood behind me and had faith in me, and, you know, gave me that security, you know, I think a young trainer needs. And, you know, so when he passed away, it was, you know, it was emotional, and just the relationship that we had, losing him, and then the family decides to sell all the horses, and we sell everything.
Yeah.
And so and I remember that sale. I was thinking, well, surely I'll get to keep some of these horses. Like, there was some great horses that I'd had and showed and done really good on.
Yeah.
And I think when it was all said and done, I think I got to keep two. I got to keep Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
Mary Cavanaugh, they bought him, and then just went blank. Ken
Hansen.
Ken Hansen.
Yes.
Bought
Yeah.
one of the 3-year-olds
Yeah.
that I had, and I got to keep that.
Yeah.
And I was going to buy. I think we had like a 10 or 11 horse trailer and a 6 horse trailer, and I was going to buy one of those. Well, shoot, they both brought more money. Everything in that sale brought more money than what it cost to buy it new. It was the dangest thing ever. So finally, like, I think one of the last things that sold was a stock trailer, and I paid too much for it, but I bought it because I had to have something to shuffle some horses around, So, I mean, it was tough. It was, it was hard watching all the work that you had done and these horses that you had made, drive out the driveway, and it really was. It was starting over.
Did you have any other outside horses at that time, or?
Very few.
Yeah.
I had a few outside horses. I rode a few for Bill Strom while Charles was funny. He's when we first started, it was just riding his horses, but then he thought, well, if we take some outside horses, I can kind of cheapen up the expense, and but he didn't really want me showing other people's horses.
Yeah.
So. A lot of what I had, the few that I had, they were mainly, horses for, non-pros or amateurs or something like that.
Yeah.
But
so what did you do? Did you go hang out a shingle? Did you start making calls?
Well, so I worked out a deal to lease that facility from his family while they were trying to get it sold. And I think it took about 1.5 years for it to get it sold. And people started, sending me horses, and it ended up, it seems like within a year, I had a barn full of horses and people everywhere, and it came around pretty quick, but in the moment it was pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it came around pretty quick because in 2001 you cracked the $500,000 mark in earnings that year. You're riding horses like Hiya Doolin, Jack Ruby, Knew I Would, Smart Be Back, Sunet's Dooley, Zach's Forward, and then you're third at the Futurity on Little Pepto Gal and a finalist on Zach's Lena. And so they're two pretty big names that we can all relate to that have been around the industry. How did that transition feel? Like, obviously you're going hardcore right here, showing all these horses and winning that much money. You've really stepped up the amount you're showing and what you're doing.
Yeah, so Knew I Would was the year before Little Pepto Gal. So I had her as a 3-year-old in 2000, and I was third at the Futurity on her in 2000. And obviously I think I had figured out my training method, my style, and I was confident in it, and that was working for me. But I started getting some good horses, and one thing, like when I worked with Charles, we shared those horses a lot, and when I went on my own, I still had to share some, but a lot of those really good horses I had, I didn't have to share them then, and I think that made a big difference. Yeah. Especially here at the Futurity, it's long, and it's a lot on these horses when they're young, and I think when by the time if you're sharing those horses, they've been through, 2 rounds, the Open and then the non-pro and whatever else, and by the time you get to the semifinals at the end of it, those horses start getting tired, you know, and it's a little harder to compete with the horses that are just going in the open that are fresh, and
Yeah.
you know, so I think that made a difference. But you know, I was real fortunate to, I got you know, people sent me some really good horses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and everything is clicking. I mean, they were some of the most productive years, you know, of your career. You won over $600,000 for the next 5 years per year. I mean, almost over $2 million in that little period right there. And then we're going to transition into now what I call the stud years, because these names and this time period to me is just something that's pretty unique that we don't see, you know, in today's world very much. In 2004, you're a semi-finalist at the Futurity on one-time Pepto, and then the next year you've got one-time Pepto as a 4-year-old. You've got It's Just About Me as a 5-year-old. You've got J-Bus Fancy.
So Clint actually, Charles, trained It's Just About Me.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yes, but you showed it. Some.
No, well, I showed it a little bit,
okay.
but he,
all right.
yeah, he gets the credit on that one.
That's true.
I'm not going to take credit
I'm
for
glad
that
you
one.
said I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah, and then you've got Smooth as a Cat, and then you've got your third at the Futurity that year, and I'm Counting Checks.
Yes.
So you've got some pretty big names in the trailer right there going down the road. Talk about that dynamic. I mean, now you're dealing with, here's these studs, and maybe at the time there wasn't all the hype about them, obviously, until a little bit later, until they started winning, but you've got some pretty high-power studs right here. There's promotion going on in the background. There's owners that are trying to create, you know, a stud and a whole package around that. And here you are going down the road, and you got 3 of these, 4 of these in the back of your trailer right there.
Well, you know, and I'll talk about Smooth as a Cat first, because he was the first one I had, and Tommy Mannion had sent him to me, and it was actually the first highbrow cat I had trained. And I remember I went over to Phil's to work one day. You might have been there. I don't remember.
Yeah, 2000. No, not at 2004.
But anyway, so I worked him over there one day. I really liked that horse, but he didn't feel cowy enough to me. And I remember talking to Phil, and he watched me work him, and he said, look, that's Cat Stud. He said, you just keep doing what you're doing. He said, I promise you he said, when it cools off, September, October, he's going to be plenty cowy. And he was. I mean, he ended up, you know, being real cowy. I mean, that's what, you know, he was so smart about a cow. He didn't make mistakes. I mean, that's what made him, I think, the horse he was. And, you know, but I go back to, man, you talk about having a customer stand by you. Because I, still to this day, that's probably, in my mind, the best, most prepared horse I've brought to the Futurity. And I was the first horse in the last set, the last day of the first go-round. And you would remember back then we had the wood gates back there. And the first hole draw was probably as bad a draw as you could have in that arena, because the cattle just, they didn't want to stay back there.
No fluffy.
You know, and so I'm working my first cow on him, and everything's going good, and 3 or 4 cows run out. We didn't cause it, and I mean, it just comes a wreck. I think I marked 208 and 209 or something. Don't make a second go round on him. And so then we go to Abilene. I win the first go round. I get run over the second go round. Go to Augusta. I win the first go round. Get run over the second go round. So I've been to 3 shows on this stud.
Yeah.
That's a great horse.
Yeah.
And I haven't got him showed yet.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Tommy, he never wavered. And then we went from Augusta to Memphis, and I won Memphis on him. And then from that on, everything took off. But it, you know, I mean, it never was the horse's fault. He was good everywhere I showed him. The Futurity was just bad luck. And obviously Abilene and Augusta, I cut cows I shouldn't have cut. But, you know, there again, like, you know, Tommy was great. He stuck by me, and I mean, that horse went on to win over $500,000. So I mean, it all worked out. But you know, a lot of people wouldn't have.
Yeah, that's tough.
Wouldn't have stuck with it that long.
Yeah, and we see that today. I mean, there's horses. There's a lot of hype around. All of a sudden, they stub their toe for a couple of shows, and next thing you know, somebody else is riding it. And, you know, so there's a lot to be said for that. And then, what about one-time Pepto?
One-time Pepto, he was different in than Smooth as a Cat and Checks, and that, you know, there wasn't a lot of hype around those horses because, you know, Tommy owned them, raised them, and, you know, so I mean, there wasn't, a lot of people hadn't seen them until they were 3. You know, one time he goes through the yearling sale. It kind of funny story about that. So I just happened to be over there watching the sale when he comes in the sale rink, and I'm standing by Jeffrey Matthews, like for no reason other than, I mean, we're both just standing on the steps there, and they lead this horse in, and Jeffrey looks at me, he's pretty. What do you think he's going to bring? I said, I don't know, but it's probably going to be a lot. And same way, you know, they go to bid. I don't remember what he brought. It was 300, 350, something like that. And when they got him sold, I said, somebody looks like a good horse, you know. And he said, well, I bought him. Well, I'm standing there with Jeffrey the whole time. He never bid. So he had somebody bidding for him. Yeah. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah. He said, would you like to ride him? I said, yeah, I'd like to ride him. Yeah. And so he sent him to me and, you know, trained him, and kind of, you know, same thing on him, which it was a little faster turnaround. Like I made the futurities, the semifinals on him, and got run over in the semifinals, and, you know, cut a cow that was a little more than he could handle then. Mm-hmm. You know, that horse, he could stop so hard and so deep. He'd kind of get himself stuck a little bit early on. But I went to Abilene. I made finals on him in Abilene. I don't remember. I might have ended up kind of high up in the finals there. I don't remember what I did on him there as a 4-year-old. Yeah. But made finals on him at Augusta, and also and then won the Super Stakes on him. But it was around that Super Stakes time that horse started figuring out, got smarter, started figuring out how to still go run, stop, but grab hold of that ground and not just go through it. Yeah. And, you know, once he figured that out, man, from that time on, if you got him showed, he was hard to beat. Yeah. Like he was really cool horse.
Well, I remember, so we used to have a show in Pagosa Springs, and you had him there as a 3-year-old getting ready for the futurity. And we're all working show horses on the flag, and here you are, and you're working this roan stud. Like everybody, and we're watching you work, and we're like, "What's that?" And then, it's one-time Pepto. He's showing futurity, and I mean, just watching this horse, and we all stood there. And I mean, you worked him a while because he's been a little tough in that fresh air up there. But I mean, you could just see so much. I mean, so much expression, so much athleticism, and all the parts and pieces were there. And you were just it was just up to you to put them together.
And you know, and he wasn't a hard horse to train. Like he wasn't really that tough to train. It was just that, you know, he had to figure that part out, I think, himself. You know, I mean, I worked on it as much as I could to try to help him and stuff, but you know, it was just, you know, he had to get smarter and figure it out, and he did. Yeah. And, you know, ended up being a great horse. I mean, I think we won 308, was it 380 or something like that on him? And I only showed him twice as a 5-year-old, and we retired him. Yeah. And I think both times I showed him as a 5-year-old, I won on him. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so, I mean, if he'd have gone his whole 5- and 6-year-old year, there's no telling what that horse would have won.
Did you ever imagine back then that he'd be such a, you know, dominant producer in the cow horse world as well as
no.
I mean,
no.
That's you know, a whole new thing for him over there. Well, then you've got I'm Counting Checks comes into your barn. You go show it, third at the futurity on that one. Talk about that one a little bit.
Well, he was, and Checks, he was a little tough. Like he of the 3. As a 3-year-old, he was probably a little stuttier and a little tougher than Smooth as a Cat or one-time Pepto training until the fall, and then, you know, he just kind of give it up and kept getting better and better, and you know, he's probably, to this day, people ask me, you know, what do you think's the best horse you rode? And that's a hard, you know. Yeah. I mean, Special New Baby when she was older, you know, for sure. Yeah. But you know, Checks probably from as a 3-year-old all the way through his 6-year-old year, you know, from start to finish, he's probably the best one I had.
Was he the most consistent, maybe? I mean, obviously, he had some tough luck on those other ones, but
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. He was just, I don't know, you know, that horse, he was so smart and athletic, you know, he kind of had it all and figured it out early. And, yeah, I mean, you know, he was just a great horse.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, those years you've got the studs. How do you balance all that with everything else you've got going on? You've got these. I mean, there's big programs being built around those three, and then you've still got the rest of your program, got the rest of your clients, and doing that. How do you balance all that?
Well, I mean, you know, you just do what you have to do, basically, and I didn't really have to do a whole lot with the studs as far as, you know, the breeding side of it. You know, obviously you have to do, you know, pictures and, you know, and videos and some stuff like that. But I never was all that involved in the, you know, the actual breeding part of it. I just trained them and showed them, and, you know, so, yeah, you know, you just, just do what you got to do, what they ask you to do, and do it. So,
yeah. So then over the next couple of years, in 2007, you met Tara. You guys married in 2009. Talk about that a little bit.
No, we got married in 07.
Oh, 07, sorry,
Yeah.
07.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. How did that change things for you?
Well, I think I think the biggest way, well, it changed things in a lot of ways, but when it comes to the one, I was happy, you know, but, you know, when she got involved, you know, there's nobody takes better care of horses than she does in my mind. I mean, it's, and get one prepared, and I tell people all the time, she's more talented on a horse than I ever thought about being. I mean, people have no idea, you know, what she can do on a horse. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, just having her involved and taking care of the horses and making sure they get everything they need, you know, I mean, it really changed my program around. I mean, there was stuff that she did that I didn't even know about when it came to taking care of them and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was, you know, it was really a big deal.
Well, I feel like it kept you from sitting there watching cows, looking in the loping area,
Yes.
looking in the loping area, now you can just focus on here. When you walk down
100%,
there,
yeah.
You know, what are some of the things Tara tells you when she hands you the horse and you get ready to show?
Well, it's usually always, you know, how do the cows look, you know, and she'll tell me how the horse feels, which she almost always says they feel great whether they do or not, which is smart on her part.
Yeah.
You know, and she'll always tell me, look, just be smart, smooth, and clean, and, you know, and that's basically it. I mean, there was some times on Special New Baby it was a little more in-depth conversation, but but I mean, in general, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and you're starting, during this period now, you're starting to kind of keep a few horses of your own. You're breeding a few, or are you just buying?
Well,
you've got Peptacular,
yeah,
Patrick Ledoux.
So we bought Patrick Ledoux. I'm trying to remember how we got Peptacular. Gosh, I don't remember.
But you're starting to mix in some of your own horses in with the custom horses.
And somewhere in there we bought CD's Masterpiece. I think maybe that was 09 or somewhere around there.
Yep.
You know, yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, I've never wanted to have like a big breeding operation with my own horses, but I've always tried to have at least two, and, you know, try to get a couple colts a year just to have of our own, so that we can, you know, raise them and train them and sell them, or, you know, or whatever, but kind of have a little something there of our own. And you know, and it's hard when, you know, it's hard to, when you're on a horse trainer's budget, it's hard to compete with,
Right.
you know, a lot of the, you know, the
Yeah.
big breeders in this business. And, you know, so you just kind of buy the best you can when you can, and,
Yeah.
and make the most of it, and hopefully upgrade over time. And that's kind of what we've tried to do. And, you know, and I think we've kind of built it into to where now we've raised some pretty good horses.
Yeah. Well, and it's got to put a little extra pressure on you, like you mentioned. I mean, you're paying that entry fee yourself now, and I mean, a weekend show is one thing, but a futurity or age event, I mean, that starts adding up, and you got to feel a little bit more pressure sometimes, just in a different way. Not that you know, there's not pressure with your customer horse, but still that it's your own money, and like, am I doing the right thing here, and doing that. So, well, in 2009, Special New Baby is an Open Futurity finalist. Let's talk about her for a minute. How did what was she like early on?
So I remember I tried her as a 2-year-old during the futurity. I guess Eddie Longley had told me about her, said he thought she was special, and I just, you know, he said, you get a chance, come by and have a look at her. So I went by there one day, and so I went over there, and he had her ready, and I worked a couple cows on her. And I remember when I got in the truck to leave, I called Tara and I said, I think I just rode the best horse I've ever been on.
Really? You knew right then?
And she's like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, no, I'm serious. I think this may be the best horse I've ever been on. And I asked him if he'd sell her, and he said no. He said he didn't want to sell her right then, and you know, because I had barkers then as customers, and they had told me that, you know, hey, if you find a coming 3-year-old that you really like and want to buy, let us know. So anyway, and that was kind of the end of it until I was in Brazil doing a judge show, and then did a clinic over there for a few days. And I was over there, and Eddie called me, and he said, hey, he said, if you're still interested in that mare, I would sell her. Give me a price, big price. And, you know, and I said, well, let me, you know, I said, I'm in Brazil. I said, let me get home. I'll talk to barkers, and if they're interested, you know, I'll holler at you. So got home, called Gary and Shannon up, and honestly, I didn't figure they, you know, I'm like, they'd be like, no, that's what, and they're like, well, if you really think she's that good, let's look at her. So I was all excited. I'd been telling Tara about her. And so they brought her over, and I had built a outdoor kind of square pen kind of out by my cattle pen, and I worked in some, and I didn't have any fresh cattle. I thought, well, I'll try working some reruns up there. And so we worked up there, and it ended up being windy, and the cows were terrible, and it was hard. Like, you couldn't really tell much. And so I talked to Eddie, and I said, hey, let me keep her and try her again tomorrow. I'll work her in indoor and try different cows, and you know, and Eddie was good with it. Gary and Shannon were good with it. So, but anyway, we get back to the house that first night. Tara's like, what in the hell do you think's so great about that mare? I'm like, well, I think she's the most talented horse I've ever ridden. She's like, she doesn't really stop. I said, what are you talking about? She doesn't really stop. I think it's one of the best things about her. She said, well, I never saw it today. Yeah. So I work her the next morning, and we get her a little more tired too, and cattle are better. And I remember I cut first cow, and it takes off, and I kick her to go stop it. And I mean, that cow stops, and she just buries it. And I turned around, I said, you think she stops good enough now? And so I mean, she was phenomenal as she was. And, you know, and we bedded her, and they bought her, and, you know, and she, you know, I mean, typical dual rate mare. She was hot. Yeah. I remember, it's kind of funny, training her that year. Tara one day, she's like, what do you want me to do with this mare? Like, we can't ace her every day. Right. If I ride her as much as it takes to, like, really get her ready to work, I don't know that we're going to keep her sound. Yeah. And I said, look, I said, I want you to bring it, like, get on her, walk around a little bit, I want you to long trotter 10 times one way, turn around long trotter 10 times the other way, and I'm gonna work her. And we did that for a month, and I'm gonna say within 30 days, that mare, you'd bring her in, the first 10 times you'd go on, she's just slinging her head and being goofy, and you'd turn around and go the other way, and she'd be that same way for about the first 5 times around, and then her head would start dropping, and that 10th lap around, she'd come around, she'd stop, head would be down, get on her and work her, and she was ready to work. I mean, we kind of trained her like, look, you're going to do this, and you're going to be ready to work. Yeah. I don't know if that'd work on all of them. Yeah. But it worked on her. Yeah. But still, you know, she was hot, and you know, and a lot of horse, which as a young horse, you know, caused her to be not as consistent as she needed to be. Yeah. But as she got older and started to mature, you know, then that developed and came along, and you know, I mean, everybody knows how she ended up. So
yeah, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit, but. You know, and then during that time, so now you've been third at the futurity on her, and you're starting to mix in a bit more hauling now. Like your program, you're starting to, you know, you're going down the road a little bit more. Tara's hauling Patrick and ends up winning the world, the non-pro world championship, and you're doing more showing on the weekends, and you're still balancing the age events. How do you feel like? Did showing at the weekends, how did that help you, or how did that hinder you going to the age events? How do you feel like?
I don't think it ever hindered me. You know, I mean, you're obviously going to be gone more, you know, so you got to take those young horses with you as much as you can, or have somebody really good at home. You know, but I think it, you know, it's like the more you go show, the better you're going to be at it. You know, so I think as far as that, just, you know, I feel like the years I've hauled, I don't know, I think it's good to do that every once in a while, at least for me, or go, you know, and maybe you don't necessarily have to go haul, but showing more like that, like it kept me a little more in tune while I was training what I really needed when it was time to go put my hand down, you know, which.
Well, you and I have talked about this, you know, over the years, and I think you're always known to be a perfectionist. When you were working a horse, I mean, it was the same. It was like, it was methodical. I'm not going to say pattern, but you were very specific about what you wanted out of that work. And what I noticed, and maybe it goes back to a little bit about what Paul said about putting a bit more cow into your program, going and showing on the weekends, and especially if you're hauling, sometimes you just got to kind of forgo a little bit and get that 4th place check or get that 5th place check. And so now you're not being as critical for that little miss or that little roll out of that stop.
Right.
And it's your program's transitioning now from trying to make a perfect 228 every time to like, how can we get the best score we can get facing this situation?
Yeah.
And how important do you think that is, like to maybe some other people that have been so intense on the age event side and trying to be so perfect, and then being able to go show? Because we've seen it from other guys too, where they go haul for a year, and all of a sudden, like they just become more comfortable down there, I think, is what I'm trying to get to. And the horses, I think, are a little bit more comfortable not feeling that preciseness.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, it's all a trade-off, right? I mean, the more structure, pattern, control, whatever you want to call it, you have, you're going to give up a little cow. Yeah. You know, and the more you let them work a cow, and the cowier they are, you know, you're going to give up a little bit of that control, and that's, and to me, we're all trying to find that perfect mixture of both, and. You know, I think some of us, you know, lean to be a little more on the, you know, the cow side, let them work cow more. I've always kind of tended to be a little more on the control side. I've learned as I've gone to give more and more of that up, and, you know, and like they still have to be correct. Yeah. And I think it's important on a young horse, like they need to have a good foundation, you know, which to me, that 2-year-old year is so important, that they learn how to do things, how to stop, how to turn, all that stuff, so that as a 3-year-old, you can really teach them focus more on teaching them about a cow and letting them, learn to be smart on a cow and figure that stuff out. And then you can just remind them of the foundation part as you go through that process. But, I think showing more like that, it helped me to better, find that balance where it needed to be, not, give up a little control. And, and like, it helped me learn to, sometimes those horses learn by making a mistake. Yeah. And by doing that, sometimes by letting them make a mistake, figure some stuff out, and basically make that cow make them fix themselves, it took care of a lot of stuff that I was always pulling on them for. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it helped me learn more about that. It doesn't always have to be perfect. Right. Like they, let them make a mistake here and there, and let that cow beat them up a little bit, and let them figure it out for their own. And when they do that, it means more to them. Yeah. So I mean, it's just, which, for me, I learned a lot of that from, like I said, going and showing on the weekends, and, mm-hmm. Sometimes trying to kick through a run, and, but you still got to have that balance. You can't, like, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, and it's basically the people who win consistently, like I said, we're all trying to do the same thing. I think we're trying to find that perfect balance between cow and structure. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are consistently winning, they're doing the same thing. They just have a very narrow window. Mm-hmm. They don't ever let it go too far either way. Yeah. They keep it very balanced on where it needs to be, and they're on good horses. But
well, I think there's horses that need more cow, and there's other horses that need more pattern.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to figure out each horse individually. Sure. I don't think you can go in and train every horse the same way. I mean, we all know that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as trainers, I know for myself, I want all of them to be a certain way. Yeah. But you have to go about getting them that way differently on different horses. Yeah.
Yeah. How so while you're hauling and going into these years where you're spending more time on the road, you're taking your 3-year-olds with you, and now that you're programmed for the futurity. Let's say you're fast tracked to the futurity. In usual years, it would have been working at home X days a week, pre-works, futurity. Now you're all over the place, and you're not working fresh cattle all the time. You're not working every day or maybe every 5 days a week. You're on the road, you're working in practice pens, you're working flags, you're working in deep ground, you're working on pasture, you're working in all different conditions. You're sitting on the horse, you're trail riding on the horse. From your experience, what did you find? Like, how did that feel different to you, or did it help you? To me, it seems like it helps you. You're more in tune with your horse as far as like cuts, the reining. I mean, just doing different things that you're spending more time on those horses.
I think it's like any of it. I think it helps you in some areas. I think it hurts you in some areas. I know the year I won the world in 21, and I don't know, maybe the horses I had weren't as good as I thought they were. Maybe I didn't do as good a job as I thought I did. I don't know, but they didn't show as good as I thought they would at the futurity. And, and looking back on it, I don't know, was it, I mean, they were mature. They had been everywhere. Like, that wasn't an issue. I don't know if I didn't get to work them on cattle enough, or or what it was, or maybe they just weren't as good as I thought. I don't know. Right. But I think it's like anything. I think they're parts of it. As far as hauling them around and getting them in different places. I mean, they mature mentally quicker, and all that part was good. But I don't know. They didn't feel. I guess maybe they didn't feel quite as comfortable and confident as I thought they were going to be. I don't know. It was funny. The next time I did it, I made sure I worked because I worked flag a lot that year, and was good. But the next time I did it, I worked them more in the practice pen and stuff like that. I would just try to do it in ways where I felt like I could get a good work without as much pressure, and those horses seem to be better. So, yeah, I don't,
it's going to depend on the horse.
Yes.
But I feel like you get to know the horse a little bit more because now you're doing more trail riding on it, or you might settle a herd on it once in a while, or just riding it out in the pasture. Whereas when you're at home in that program, the loper hands you the horse, you work it, you hand it back, and that's it. And while you're on the road, you're spending more time. You're cleaning stalls. You're getting to know the horse inside out a little bit more, I think, just from my perspective, from what I've seen. Yeah. All right, so Matt, we're gonna fast forward here a little bit to Saturday, September 12th, 2015. El Rancho Futurity Mercurio Open Finals. A pretty special day right here. You're showing Special New Baby, finishing out the hauling year here. Let's talk about this run. This was an epic run. It was a 234-point run, right? You tied Phil Rapp, the highest score that's ever been marked at a cutting. And I just want to get your thoughts on this run as we break it down. So we're going to start here as you're crossing the timeline.
Can we stop it just a second?
Yeah.
So you asked me a while ago, what Tara, what the conversation's like when she gives me a horse. So this night it was kind of funny. So anyway, she gives me the horse. Mike Wood had already gone. I don't remember where I was and said I was deeper.
Yeah.
He had already gone and had a really good run. I marked a 28 maybe,
I think
something
it was
like that.
29, yeah.
But really good run.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was deeper in the herd. And so anyway, I go to get on her. And Tara said, "How the cows look?" And I said, I think there's some cows in there that I can hold and get a decent check, or there's some riskier cows in there I can cut. And if I hold them, I might can win it. And she says, "Well, all right, good." She said, "Just get a good check." And I remember I got on her, I pulled her around, and I said, "No, I think I'm gonna try to win it." And she just kind of ducked her head. And so anyway, that was our conversation.
That's the conversation. Well, and to set the stage a little bit, I mean, as you see on the video here, I mean, it's such a unique place to show. There is so much atmosphere. We've got Drew Stu on the mic, hyping everything up, pumping everything up. We've got the music playing loud. We've got the crowd cheering, and everybody's amped up. And not to mention the fact that you and this mare have become a celebrity throughout the years. I mean, you've got people coming up to your stalls while you're on the road. I've seen them out there, Idaho, and out west there. So there's quite a bit going up to this.
Well, and I mean, at this point, I mean, it's funny, like, when I was on that mare, I think we both knew what the other one was thinking. I mean, we were that in tune, and I had so much confidence in her, like, there wasn't, I mean, I never was really scared about putting her in a position she couldn't handle.
Well, and I'm going to start the video, but that's one thing that happened pretty quick is this run didn't start out easy. I mean, right off the bat.
This first cow, everybody talks about, I think it was the second cow because she did some really cool stuff. But this first cow, not many horses hold this first cow. I mean, it was tricky.
Well, I was standing I was in the bleachers on the left-hand side, and so it looked even more dramatic from where I was standing. But if you watch here as you shape this red cow up, and was this your pick?
Yeah, and I knew it was going to be touchy, but yeah.
So right there, I mean, that cow took a run at you right there, and she just gathered it right back up and brought it right back to the middle.
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, she's just so smart, so quick right there. And I mean, it's cows, yeah.
A lot of pressure right there. You've got the crowd behind you. You come in here and cut this second cow. Was this another pick?
This was another pick, yeah. I think they all three were. The last cow, I had about 4 cows when I went down there, and the last cut I had
there.
Oh,
she'll just drop down and draw that cow to her. Just so quick, that head and neck.
This mare right here, she could start and stop faster than any horse I've ever been on, still to this day. Some people know this, but I had to, at the end of this year, I tore my shoulder, my right shoulder, like just holding on to the saddle horn all year. Like I had to go get stem cell injections in my shoulder because like just the constant, you know, start and stop.
What was your reaction there as that score came up? What did you know that you had done something special?
Well, I hate to say I know, but like I felt like we for sure won the cutting. And like I said, Mike had already had a really good run. So I mean, I knew it was going to be a big score. I think one of the coolest things about that run was, you know, a few months after that, you know, I'd run into 2 or 3 of the judges that were there, and they were like, you know, I wish I'd have marked it more.
Right.
You know, and you know, so I mean that was cool, and you know, I mean I don't know that. I mean I'll probably never have a run that good again. I mean I don't know how you would, you know. So
it's hard to beat,
you know, to have the opportunity to, you know, just I mean that whole year. I mean that run was obviously phenomenal, and it all worked and it was great. But that whole year, just hauling that mare, and like you know, I learned a lot about, you know, it's funny, just like Tara would put little stuff on Facebook about that mare throughout the year, and
you
like,
laying in the stall with her, putting a blanket on,
and the stuff like that, or me feeding her cookie, or you know, all that stuff. The amount of people that would react to that was 20, 30 times what you could put that run on there. Well, that run's got a lot of views now, but you could put some other runs on there, you know, and it'd get, you know, the likes and shares and all that. But nothing in what, you know, just me being in the stall with her, petting on her, feeding her cookie. Like, I mean, you could go in there, she could be laying down, I could lay back against her and she'd just lay there, you know, put her head in your lap, and all that stuff, you know, that stuff would just blow up. And, you know, and I remember we were having the conversation about her, and she said, well, you know, what you got to understand is that, you know, there's very few people that can relate to having that kind of run on her, but said everybody that owns a horse can relate to, you know, you feeding her cookies, or you know, and what was, I think maybe the truly remarkable thing about that whole year, so the Congress came around, and we weren't planning on going to the Congress because I didn't think I needed to, and I felt like I needed to stay home and ride my 3-year-olds, and but we had so many messages, like through Facebook and text messages and different stuff, people asking if we were going to bring baby there. That finally I told her, I said, look, let's, you know, if you can get her out there where I can fly in and show her and then fly back home, you know, I think we can make this work. So we did, and ended up winning it, and that place was packed that night. And I remember they had like, NCHA had like 50 t-shirts to give away, and they wanted all the finalists, open finalists there to stay and like give the t-shirts, sign them, blah, 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 whatever. And so I might have been the last horse or next to the last horse in the final, something like that. And so I was doing that, getting my awards, doing the t-shirt deal, and Tara had just kept baby in there, took her saddle off and was cooling her out, and while they were doing the t-shirt deal, she was just kind of standing there at the end of the line, just holding baby, waiting on me. Well, the first people that go through that line was a man and his daughter, and they got their shirts, and they go to walk off, and the little girl says, hey, can I get my picture taken with baby? Tara's like, yeah, sure. So they stand there and they take their picture. Well, so now everybody in that line,
they want a
picture with baby, and they run out of t-shirts, and the line is still out the door. People just to get their picture taken with baby. It was the dangest thing I ever seen, and it dawned on me. I'm like, man, like this is a lesson in marketing right here, like that.
The power of social media, and I think that showing the human side.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there was a lot behind the scenes that we didn't know, the big price tag, the pressure on you,
Yeah.
you know, third at the futurity, things like that. But then all of a sudden you start hauling, and now you're thinking Hall of Fame. She won over $400,000, but you've got a relationship with this mare, and Tara just happens to document it.
Yeah.
And like you said, it takes off because it shows a real human side. You know, it's not the business show, hand the horse off, go to my next one. This is like, hey, I'm out here cleaning, I'm putting her blanket on tonight, I'm hanging out, giving her a cookie, I'm laying in the stall with her. And it really shows how much this sport is more than just a sport. It's a
Right.
lifestyle, you know,
Right.
and that's NCHA is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I've flowed, you know, I think we, as an industry association, I think we miss a lot of opportunities. Like I look at our Horse of the Year race, I don't know why we don't do,
Yeah.
you know, because like and I mean, we should do it with the World Finals every year too, those horses hauling for the world, but, you know, take those top 4 or 5 horses or whatever that, you know, Horse of the Year race and
Yeah.
and World Finals too, and you know, do little specials on, not like
Yeah.
do whatever on the rider, but show, you know, that horse.
Yeah.
and get, because you know, you like what I learned through just that stuff she did, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the people, like she had her own fan club.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Tara created that just by those little silly videos she
Yeah.
put on Facebook.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, and she's a phenomenal horse, but I mean, so are all the, you know,
Yeah.
so are all those others that were, you know, where you take the top 4 or 5 Horse of the Year and, you know, World Finals horses. I mean, they're going to be phenomenal horses too.
They're
And,
the elite athletes of
yeah,
the sport.
and
yeah.
you know, and I would like to see us do some more stuff like that
Yeah.
as an association and an industry, because
Yeah.
I don't know, I think we're missing a big opportunity there. But
Yeah. Well, and I think the Yellowstone effect, the
for sure.
performance horsemen, that is
Yeah.
highlighting those
Yep.
top, and they are becoming, you know, superstars.
Yeah.
And just like the riders doing media days, and the
Yeah.
horses become, you know, special. You know, there's so much hype about it. But I think you're right. I think that there can be more to be done, you know, to
Yeah.
promote that side of it, and I agree with that. Well, coming off that phenomenal year, I mean, so many emotions that year. Then you come back the next year and you win the futurity. And this is something that, with all the success you'd had up until now, that was the one thing that still had eluded you up until that point. But you come in on second spot in 2016 and win the futurity. And that night, the emotions that night too were just phenomenal. What are some of the memories you have of second spot? I can see you getting emotional on it, because
you know, I like it, you know, goes back to God's plan, God's timing, you know. That mare obviously could do some phenomenal stuff, but I honestly thought when the futurity started, I didn't think I'd get her through 2 rounds to even make the semifinals, much less 3 rounds, because she just, like, I never got her to feel consistent to me going into the futurity. And you know, and which, if you go back and you watch, like the first go round, she's good, the buzzer goes off, she has a big miss right after the buzzer, but it's after the buzzer. Kind of same thing second go round. The semifinals, like buzzer goes off, she goes to the left, doesn't want to turn back around to the right after the buzzer.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I mean, everything in the 2.5 minutes is spectacular. And, you know, and I never will forget Johnny Mitchell calling me as I was driving home the night of the semifinals. He says, "Look, Matt," he said, "you've got a legit chance of winning the futurity on that mare." And he said, "I know in the back of your mind right now, like, you're not very happy with it."
You're only focused on that 1 second after the buzzer, and not the.
He says, "Look," he says, "I'm not saying don't address it, but he said address it, but don't make a big deal out of it. Just work her, And he said, you come back tomorrow night and you cut some good cows, you're going to win the futurity. And, you know, and I really appreciated that because, like,
he calmed your mind out because you're ready to go change some stuff and do some
drastic and just
stuff.
Kind of gave me the confidence to, you know, to stick with what I'd been doing, you know, and I mean, and, you know, it was kind of that whole, but, you know, that whole futurity, which I think you see this a lot with the futurity, like, it just, you know, she ended up being a great horse and showed better than I thought she might, which is always a good feeling. But, you know, it's just like everything kept falling into place.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then, you know, I win the semifinals on her. I get, you know, I don't remember when it was. I saw my draw in the finals, and I'm like fourth in the second set, and I'm like, this is just nuts. Like, you know, it's just like, And I mean, I remember I showed her the first go round. Gavin texted me right after showing her, and he said, I just saw the futurity channel.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, and it was just like, I don't know, it was the weirdest thing, just meant to be, and it just kind of all kept coming together.
Well, and that's what makes this futurity so special, though. I mean, it's the most level playing field we have all year. It's the most unknown we have. I mean, especially the first go-around. Nobody knows what they've got. Now, after the first go-around, you start to feel some things. But there's so many variables, and there's so many times where we see, you know, there's horses through the rounds that we say, that's going to be a champion, that's going to be a champion, and they don't make it to that final round. And then there's other horses. I made the futurity finals one time, marking 2.5s and, you know, 3s, whatever, and get to the final. But I mean, he was just the most consistent one.
Yeah.
I've had a dozen horses that I thought were way better than that one, and I'm sure you've, you know, say the same thing with all the horsepower you've ridden. But it all comes down to those 2.5 minutes that day, and that's
well,
what dictates
and I
it.
think that and I think you watch, you know, like some of those horses, you know, like that first go round's a big deal. You know, to me, I feel like if you can get those horses shown that first go round, get them through a good clean run, to me it helps their whole career. I mean, like get that, you know, that first time in this building and get them through you know, a good run. I think it helps their confidence, it helps our confidence, you know, but then going forward from that, you know, you continue to watch, and, you know, some of those horses just keep getting better.
Yes, they change a lot.
And, you know, and like even the ones that really stick out in that first go round, you come back, by the time you get to the finals 3 weeks later or whatever it is, you know, they're different horses.
Oh, yeah. It's a different
and then there's always a few that go the other way too.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I think it's not talked about publicly a lot, but you know, so we have our, you know, 6 days for the first go round, 3 days for the second go round, and then you know, and then we don't show them again for what, 2 weeks or something
10
like
days,
that.
12 days, yeah.
You know, and I, you know, that's to me, a lot of times, I think the futurity's won and lost in that 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, and there is no, you know, set plan, you know, as to what are you going to do with them those 2 weeks? How much time off are you going to give them? How much are you going to work them? You know, like, and, you know, because, like, there's always, I mean, I struggle with this every year. It's, you know, because you've worked them so much, getting them ready, you know, for this show. Like, it's good to give them, and when I say a break, I mean, like, when I give mine a break, mine never get more than 1 day a week that they don't get out of their stall and do something.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, I mean, you know, they're still going to get exercise, but they're not going to get work.
Right.
You know, and it's how much, but, you know, which, you know, some of them need that time to, you know, let them get away from it for a little bit, just exercise, keep them legged up, you know, and then, you know, but, you know, how much of that, you know, I think we all, I know I struggle with that, you know, how much should I keep working this horse? How much, you know, and balance that off. I mean, obviously, as you get close, you know, those last 4 or 5 days before the semifinals, you're probably going to work them every day, but, you know, that time in between, it's, keeping them healthy,
Yeah.
keeping them,
So much strategy.
sound, and keeping them from getting sick. And, it's.
Because we're building up. I mean, obviously there's 2 years of training, and then those last 2 months we're doing pre-works. We're building up, and we're getting ready for that first round, right? And then depending on where you drew, you're either going straight from the pre-works into that first day, or you've got 4 or 5 days. But then once those go-rounds are done and they go back to back, and then like you said, you've got that break. There's some horses you're kind of keeping pieced together that are a little bit sore, got some little soundness issues, whatever. There's others that are feeling great. There's others that maybe they didn't have a very good second go-round, but you had enough in that first go-round. Now all of a sudden you're thinking, what do I need to do to get back to where I was?
Well, that's kind of even like me right now. So I showed both of mine the second day. Well, as far as looking at the pre-draw, it looks like I won't show them again until the last day of the second go-round.
Yeah.
Probably
So
late in
twice.
the last day of the second go-round.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, the same thing now.
Yeah.
So, give them a little bit of a break, let them freshen up a little bit, but, But
if that works, then you've got a blueprint for after that second go-round too.
Yeah, some
if it doesn't work,
If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter.
That's it. Well, but that's and that's why the futurity is so exciting. Just seeing these horses come out, and then, but this is also the toughest. The toughest show of the year for the trainers. What are some of the things you do mentally to stay focused? I mean, obviously, when you're showing those horse age events, Super Stakes, Summer Spectacular, you come in, you might have a few little nerves here or there, but I mean, you're in a routine. But you come here on the unknown, especially that first go around. What are some of the things you do mentally to kind of keep yourself balanced?
Well, so I'm very big on the mental side of it. Like, I think it's huge. I know it is for me. I think we all learn to deal with the pressures and different stuff, and we all get nervous. And the only reason we ever get nervous is because we're worried about the result. If we didn't worry about the result, there would be no need to get nervous. But especially the better horse you have.
Yeah.
And
higher price tags and all that.
And I've learned to try to, one, like, I try to never let anything negative enter my mind. If it does, as soon as it does, I try to think of something positive, and I've got a thing I say to myself. I heard a deal a while back about Michael Phelps when he was, competing swimming. He said he said he would say, like, words of affirmation or whatever, to himself every time he walked through a doorway. Mm-hmm. So you think about that. How many times you walk through a doorway in a day?
It's a lot of positivity in a day.
And, so like I came up with a deal. I tell myself all the time, I'm a winner, I'm the best, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. Mm-hmm. And I try to remember, and it's amazing. I started doing this stuff a long time ago because I had listened to some tapes that Paul had given me, and it was a lot about how, just the stuff that comes out of your mouth. Like when people, say, hey, good luck later, or, do good later, what, how do you respond? Do you say I'll try, or, or, mm-hmm. and if you're always positive and, I will do good later, and everything, if you're always positive in that and your attitude and what comes out of your mouth, your subconscious picks up on that. And over time, you are confident because you've made yourself confident.
Yeah, you surrounded yourself with confidence.
So I mean, I really, but you have to practice it. Like, you can't just, like, you have to actually do it for, so I'm big on that. I used to be really big on it, and I got a little bit lazy, and now here recently I've really started working on it again, and I can see the results. From when I wasn't working on it, and now that I am, like, just in the way I feel when I'm down there showing a horse. And, so I mean, I'm a big believer in you have to work on the mental side. But what for me, like, it's hard. To me, I get the most nervous in the downtime. You know, like that's when.
Feel like you're out of your routine?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just, you know, when, you know, negative thoughts and stuff like that can creep in. But like when they put, you know, so I really have to work on it then, because I don't ever want, you know, negative thoughts, and I don't want to be around negative people.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I try to guard myself against that. And, you know, but when they put when my cattle, my set of cattle come in the arena, you know, then I just focus on doing my job. Because if the only way to have a good result is to do your job. And in cutting, you know, there's some things we have control over, there's some things we don't.
Yeah.
But I believe if I take care of everything I have control of in my run, I've given myself the best chance to be successful.
Yeah.
So that's what I focus on. And I don't worry about the rest. I don't worry about the ground. I don't worry about the judges. I don't worry about anything I don't have control over. I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But I just try to focus on make sure, you know, I treat it like a job. You know, what's my job? Make good, clean cuts.
Yeah.
You know,
Drive up.
like drive up,
Yeah.
get up there, make good, clean cuts, get your hand down,
Yeah.
make sure your quits are clean. You know, help your horse as much as you can to stay even with the cow so you don't have a mess.
Yeah.
And, you know, all those things that you have control of, you know, don't hot quit, don't switch cows, don't, you know, like all that stuff. Focus on doing your job, things you have control of. And if you do that, the results are going to take care of themselves. You know what? You're not always going to have a good result.
Right.
But if you do your job the best you can do and you control the things you can control, you're going to do good more than you're going to do bad, because you've put yourself in that position to do good.
Yeah. The cows are going to take you out. I mean, the cows are just that unknown factor sometimes.
Right.
But don't let it be something you did that took you out when you
Right.
had the right cows, when everything was lined up, your horse was good.
And even the cows, I mean, like, you know, I mean, yes, it's an educated guess, and sometimes we're wrong, sometimes we're right, sometimes we get lucky.
Yeah.
But still, like, you know, you got to watch the cows, pay attention, you know, don't cut something you know that's bad, don't cut a rerun, you know, I mean, like, you know, all that, I mean, that's all part of, you know, I don't necessarily have control over if a cow's good or bad when I cut it, but I do get to pick which cows I cut.
Yeah, you're in the driver's seat.
So, you know, and because I'm in charge of that whole 2.5 minutes. So whatever happens, I'm either going to be the reason it succeeds or fails, more than likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it, you know, so I mean, that's just kind of how I look at it. And to me, if I go about it that way and I stay focused on my job and doing my job properly, then that kind of fills everything up and it doesn't leave room for negative stuff.
Yeah.
Because I try to get so immersed in that there is no room for anything else, and that's what works for me.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, and it's obviously work, but it's taken discipline to learn how to do that and to control yourself and do that. And that's the constant thing. Like you said, sometimes you stray away from it, you start feeling that negativity come back in. Being able to know when that's happening, being able to say, hey, I need to get back to those simple sayings, just simple little things that will help you kind of refine your focus and realign your trajectory and put yourself in those positions to win. Well, then after winning the futurity, everything up until this point has been about you showing your product out there in the show arena. In 2018, you started a new chapter in your life. You took a salary job working for Jim Van Gelden, Rock Creek Ranch. Let's talk about that a little bit. You've now transitioning. You're still focusing on yourself. You're still putting yourself out there on some of these great horses that Jim has put you on. But you've also got to split that a little bit and transition now into professional coach. Now you've got to be able to pass on those things that's going through your head and pass that on to these people that you're trying to help win. What made you kind of decide to change their...
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I'm getting older. My body's taken a pretty good beating over the years from the bad car wreck I had when I was 15, and and I've had one hip replacement surgery, and and just the wear and tear of the years of doing this. Like you don't think about it. Like it's not like we're riding bucking horses every day and stuff like that. But so you don't think about but 40 years of doing this, like it takes a toll on your body to somewhat, and and I reached a spot to where there is no real retirement plan for horse trainers.
Right.
You have to make your own.
Yeah.
And and I reached a spot to where I didn't feel like I could continue riding the number of horses that it was going to take for me to ride running my own operation, basically to keep all the bills paid and all that. So I started looking at, well, if I go to work for somebody, and somebody that will buy good horses and have good horses, and but I don't have to ride 30 or 40 a day.
You're condensing your program and becoming more productive.
And so I mean that was the motivation behind it to me, was trying to get in a situation to where I could still do what I do, still ride good horses, but ride 15 or 20 a day maybe instead of twice that much. And because I feel like if I can do that, I mean I can probably still do this another 15 years probably.
Yeah.
And be successful, I think. But the way I was going, I don't know that my body would have held up, to have that kind of longevity. But now, working for somebody and riding fewer horses, it's given me the opportunity to still ride good horses, but not have to ride as many. And and also the financial freedom a little bit to put some money some other places, and and try to get something set up for when I am done.
Yeah. And I think preventing that burnout phase, where
that's a
it
big
is,
part of it too.
Horse after horse, but it's also changed. Whereas in the past, you've got a barn full of horses, and it's almost like doing a draft pick when you go to a show, picking which ones you're going to go show, which ones are at their peak. And now all of a sudden, that pool has gotten a lot smaller. And those horses may go through some changes throughout the year, or be a little bit sore here or there. And you've got to ride those horses, and they're just going to keep buying more. So that's changed. You've got to kind of, I guess, plan for the long run a little bit more on these horses rather than just trying to get the most out of them at each show.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, I mean, and don't get me wrong, like you got to have horsepower, but sometimes making the best of what you got makes you better. And and you can still, if you do your job good enough, like I said, you still have to have a good enough horse under you, but maybe you don't have the winner, but maybe you can get those horses where you can still make finals and get checks, and and if you can do that on some of the lesser horses that aren't good enough to be the champions, but you can still go make finals, get checks and stuff like that. It keeps you sharp, and you're just, because you're not, I don't care who you are, what you do, you're not always going to have the winner.
No.
I don't care if you got 100 horses to pick from. Some years you're just not going to have them. But if you can make the most of what you have to where you can still be competitive, then when that next really good one comes around, you're going to be ready for it. That was another thing Paul told me a long time ago. So I mean, sometimes that, it's not a bad thing, like being in that position.
Yeah, and not trying to make a 76 horse out of a 74 horse. I mean, that 74 horse, you're going to maybe, those types of horse, you're going to win second, third, or fourth some. You're just going to have to show them a little bit more, because at the end, it's the money that counts. So, you've got your 76, 78 horses, which you had. you may only need to you're winning Mercurius on those, and you're winning these other big deals, and then you got in your 25 novice, you've got these horses that are just battling it out with other similar horses. I mean, you don't have a superstar per se.
And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about, as trainers, I believe, all we can do in our job is to teach that horse to do its job as efficiently as it can, with as much confidence as we can. And that leads into what you're saying. Like, every time I've tried to make a horse be more than it was, I ended up with less.
Yeah.
Because I lose the confidence. And when you lose the confidence, then you start having the misses and all that other stuff, to where, if I, instead of marking that 4 you're talking about, I'm gonna mark a 2 or a 1. And so that's where you've got to, I think as a trainer, that's where, like, we want to try to get as much as we can out of these horses, but you got to realize where the limits are.
Yeah.
And not try to push one beyond those limits. And, and like, I've had a lot of horses over my career that were a little physically limited. To me, Little Pepto Gal's one of them. But she was so smart about a cow.
Yeah.
Most people watching her would have never known it.
Yeah.
Because she is quick.
Yeah.
But she wasn't all that. She wasn't that strong, powerful. But she was so quick and she was so smart about a cow. She never got herself in trouble.
Yeah. Well, you got to push the gas pedal a different way and turn the steering wheel a different way on one like that than maybe special a baby or and those ones. They're all a little bit different. But that's where knowing what you've got, knowing how to get the most out of that, and whether it be a 74 or a 76 that day, or depending on the cattle, and not trying to shoot for that 78 every time.
Right.
I mean, that's a big part of it. Well, you win the world in 2021, the Open World Championship on Sugar Spice and Everything Nice. What a great mare that was. And let's talk, I mean, you rode so many great horses over there at Rock Creek. Metallic Drifter, Take It Easy, Smooth Sailing Cat, Hot Melody, Ricky Tricky Cat. I mean, the list goes on, but that one there, I know was pretty special.
Yeah, that was really a cool mare, and that, that was a fun year. It was fun. Because that was, I hauled I won the world on Baby in 15. But like, she was so good, and with the Mercurius, I didn't really have to go haul. Yeah. Not like you normally do. But the year with Sugar Spice and Everything Nice, like, we spent a good part of the year out on the West Coast, and that's pretty much all we did. I think I went to maybe a couple of aged events was about it.
Yeah.
And, hauling. And I tell you, it was, at the time, it was very refreshing for me just to go do something different, to get away from this a little bit. And, being at the aged events for 3 weeks at a time. And,
now you're picking up camp every couple of days.
And just go show. And, I had a couple of horses I'd show in the Open and show a couple in the Novice, and be around some different people and see different parts of the country. I mean, we had a lot of fun that year. It was fun, and Randy, he was right there. We were right there neck and neck kind of all year, pushing each other. And I mean, it was, I don't know, it was fun. It was a good experience, and I was fortunate it turned out in my favor, because, I mean, it was close. It came down to the last night.
It was an exciting World Finals.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And, so, I mean, it was a fun year. It was a good experience. And Jim came close to winning the world in the non-pro too, so, I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was really, looking back, it's one of the more fun years I've had, really.
Yeah, different experience. And again, preventing that burnout, because now you got something else you're focusing on and doing that. So then you were there until 2023, last year. You took the job with J5, Horse Ranch Management. Talk about that transition. Now you're getting the opportunity to show more of your own horses mixed in with the client's horses, still doing the coaching thing, but it's more about what you guys are doing. You and Tara spending a lot of time on the road. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I got to say, like, it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, they have been so great since I got there, and with everything, you know. I mean, it's like I said, it's for a guy in my position, I can't imagine a better place to be, because, you know, they're raising good horses, they're willing to buy good horses if you need to, and you know, but and letting me ride a few of our own too, and develop that, and you know, but being in I mean, the facility is amazing, heated air conditioner. I mean, like, you couldn't ask for a better environment to work out of, as far as barns, arenas, and all that. But you know, their attitude too towards all of it is just phenomenal. I mean, like, but I feel like they know we're going to take good care of the horses. We're going to do as good a job as we can, and you know, so I feel like they trust us and in that, and they let us do what we think we need to do, and you know, so but it's a place where I can still go get on horses good enough to compete on, win on, and not have to ride, like I said, 40 head a day, and I mean, it's I hope I can stay there till I'm ready to be done, because I mean, I love it there. They've been phenomenal. Couldn't ask for a better situation, and you know, just, I mean, even with the deal this last year with my stud, I mean, by all rights, I worked for them, and you know, they could have said, no, you know, you need to show 2 of our horses, and you know, Constance is the one that came to me and said, look, you know, your horse is the best horse, you need to show him. Yeah. And you know, and it's funny, like, even all throughout the year with the horse of the year race and stuff, and like, sometimes I'd talk to her or text her, you know, how I did on her horses, and like, all she was worried about, well, how many points did you get on Sugar Daddy, you know? And it's like, well, you know, but I mean, that's the kind of people they are, and you know, and it's just, it's such a, I don't know, I love it there, and I mean, they've been so good to us, and you know, I like, my goal now is, like, I want to, you know, hopefully here soon have that kind of horse for them, where I, you know, hopefully have a, you know, maybe a futurity winner, or you know, or horse of the year for them. Like, I want, you know, like, and it'll come, like, we're getting there, and but it's like, I can't imagine being anywhere better.
Yeah. Well, you know, and talking about Sugar Daddy, this year at the Cascades Futurity, there was a pretty special day there, and I believe that's the day you went over the $10 million mark. You showed, or you won 3 championships that day. One of them was the 3-year-old Constellation round, but it was still a win, right? You won the 4-year-old Open. Well, you won the 3-year-old Constellation on 2 School for Cool, the 4-year-old Open on Sugar Daddy, and the 5-6-year-old Open on It's Getting Hot in Here. The special thing, not just about winning all 3 of those that day, was all 3 of those were by different studs, Cool and Hot, Kit Kat, Sugar, and Hottish, but all out of Andrea. How special was that?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, because I mean, that's, you know, like I said, go back to, I think it was somewhere around 2009 that we bought CD's Masterpiece, who was the mother of Andrea, and you know, and to see that all started with I wanted a CD Elena broodmare. And I was looking at one that Eddie Longley had, and Tara said, well, she loved CD's Masterpiece, and you know, and she said, well, let me find out, you know, where this mare is and stuff. So anyway, so she hunted her down and got her bought, and you know, we started raising babies out of her, and you know, and to see all that, like, you know, Andrea came about because I had special new baby and loved her, so she's like, what do you want to breed Macy to? I'm like, let's breed her to dual ray, you know, and we got Andrea, and then, you know, I had, when I was riding Sugar Spice and everything nice, you know, and loved her, she's like, what do you want to breed on her? Well, let's breed her to Kit Kat Sugar.
Yeah.
You know, and we end up with Sugar Daddy, and kind of the same thing with Coolin'. I wasn't Hottish. I wasn't riding the Hottish at the time, but I loved, like, they were so cool moving, like cool horses. I hadn't had one, so, you know, let's try a Hottish. And then, you know, and then to have, like, you know, fast forward through all that, and then have those horses all, you know, all at the same time, and to have that happen, you know, all in one day, like that was really cool.
Yeah, it was definitely special. I don't know if it's ever been done before, but
I don't know either.
You know, and for you to have that connection to those bloodlines going all the way back to CD's Masterpiece, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty good moment. We've talked about a lot of the highlights of your career. You know, we talk a lot about the mental stuff and the mental side of this game, but listening to podcasts is a big thing. And I used to listen to one, and it was called From Poop to Gold. Stupid name, but had cool stories, right? And it always talked about entrepreneurs or athletes or you know, the success they'd had, but what was a moment during their career or their life where they were kind of down, like bad things happened, or you were kind of down in a spot where you weren't comfortable. Is there a moment that you can look back at where you were kind of struggling and not sure where your future was, and how did you work your way out of that?
Oh man, there's been multiple moments of those. I mean, even when I first started, I think I told you the story about the very first show I went to as a trainer was in Abilene. I rode a couple of horses for my dad, and I never will forget. Greg Welch used to turn back for me all the time in the non-pro and stuff, and I ran into him like first day, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, why would you turn your non-pro card in? I said, well, I can't really afford to do it as a non-pro, and I said, and I want to know if I'm good enough to compete with you guys. And he looked at me and he said, well, you're not, and you never will be. And I thought, well, you old son of a gun. Like, and I mean, and it flipped the switch in me. I'm like, you know what? I'll show you.
Little did he know that he started.
And like, and honestly, from that day on, every time I've been faced with a setback or somebody not believing in me, or I used to even like when I had, you know, some of the good horses and I'd end up being last in the draw, like, I'd take it personal. I'm like, you're not gonna keep me out of the finals. Like,
yeah,
it's not gonna happen.
Yeah,
you can put me last if you want to, but and you know, and I mean, and I've just kind of, so like, I think, and I think Greg started it that day, but like, you know, kind of ever since then, like, I've just kind of always had that in me. Yeah. But that being said, I mean, you can talk to Terry. I mean, there's been days I'm like, man, I need to go sell cars or something. Like, I'm, you know, just lost. Like, you know, like that, you know, like I didn't know what to do. Yeah. Like, I didn't, you know, where I felt like I couldn't even train a horse anymore. Yeah. And, you know, and I don't know if everybody goes through that, but I've gone through it several times. But the funny thing is, and I was having it, you know, for some of you younger guys out there that are trying to figure this out, like, for me, what I finally worked out is that you can make this as complicated as you want to, but the more complicated you make it, the more complicated it's fixing to get. Yeah. And every time I would get off in the ditch and lost, like, I would finally get to a point I'd be like, you know, look, just go, when you go work a horse, like, don't think about anything else but stay even with the cow. Make sure that cow's pulling you through a turn. Don't worry about anything else. And in 4 or 5 days, everything started getting better again. Mm-hmm. And after like getting in the ditch like 20 different times throughout my career, I'm finally like, why don't you just focus on that all the time and let's don't get in the ditch? And, you know, and really, I mean, and you still, not that still don't struggle, but like, you go back to foundation on a horse, it's like I've kind of made that my foundation now. Like if I go to getting things go to not feeling right, I know now, man, just go like make sure I'm focusing on your position and your timing with the cow is good. Because if that's good, everything else might not be perfect, but it's not going to be too far out of whack if you're on a good horse.
We can. It's so easy to overcomplicate this whole thing,
Yes.
and to get, like you said, get off into the weeds and to worry about the little things. But I remember coming and working with you one time that you told me that exact same thing. Let that cow pull, let that nose come through that turn and just work your way from there, And as long as you can keep that in time, that's what creates that turnaround. Not that big, spurring them through there, whatever. Let that cow pull you through there, and then. But it's simple.
It took me a long time to learn that. Shorty Freeman told me when I was 18 years old, I spent a week working with him. And at the end of the week, he told me, he said, look, Matt, he said, you're a really good hand. He said, you're talented. Everything you do really well. But he said, there's something about you that really puzzles me. And I said, what's that? He said, well, I don't see how anything that you do has anything to do with a cow. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm working the cow the whole time. He said, no, there's a cow in front of you, but you're not working it. I'm like, what's this old guy talking about? Like, he's crazy.
That's what Paul was hinting at too. Yeah.
And, it only took me 30 some odd years to figure out what he's trying to tell me, but
simple is better sometimes. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you, sitting down. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I pulled that Equistat report while we were at Cascades, 29 pages, so there was a lot to go through. I'm really glad that you sat down and we've got to learn more about the program. And I think there were so many stages in your career that I think was so unique, and people can learn from that, and the business side of this, and it's becoming more and more with cutting now that there's a business side of this, that sometimes it's not just about going from the barn to the arena, there's more to it, and you're diving into that a little bit now with having your own stud to promote with Sugar Daddy, and I think there's just so many parts and pieces to where the whole cutting thing has evolved over the years from when you first started, from when I first started, to what it is now, the 2-year-old sales, what that's doing to the industry. And I hope people can get something out of this interview and learn a little bit about, what you've gone through and some of the mistakes you might have made and some of the, the things that you learned throughout your career. But
I hope so, because, I haven't had I wouldn't have had the career I've had without people helping me, and so I want to help other people, and I think that's, you got to pay back, and that's part of it, and a big part of it, like you said, like especially for these younger guys, like it's important, like to think about, and the earlier the better. I'll always try to have something else working for you other than just this. Yeah. Like that when you get an opportunity to do that, like it's important, and it's not always easy to find because this takes up so much time. Yeah. It's hard, but like if you find an opportunity to, put some money in something else that will make you money over time and give you some security, because I think that's the hardest thing about doing this for a living is, there's not a whole lot of security in it.
Yeah.
If you don't own your own place and, all that stuff. So like, I think that's real important because, it's not going to last forever either at some point in time,
Yeah.
Well,
and I think Warren Buffett said it, if you can find something that you can make money while you're sleeping, and that's
mailbox money. That's what Charles used to call it. He said, I want some of that mailbox money.
That's what it is. Yeah. Well, Matt, thanks again. I know you got to get back over there and help some of your fellow competitors over there in the Coliseum. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, enjoyed it. It was fun.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Yeah.